last video was done in Python, and this is the Lua version, but I thought rather than trying to, as I did with the Python one, step through the code so that you can see basically the same end result, I thought I'd do it in a slightly different way so that you can see the actual differences between Lua here on the left and the equivalent Python on the right. So we're now looking at the just drop that up there. We're now looking at the main.py, which is the main file that runs it, compared with main.lua. So if we wind it up to the top, then in Python, if we want to import any other files, libraries and so on, you use this import. So we were importing the keyboard library, which is one that I wrote, the console library, one that I wrote, and these are the other files that we're using in the game. In the Lua version, we've still got some library files up here. There's one additional one which is not included in Python, which is the class.lua. I won't go into that at this stage. Then we've got 4 files as before: game, main, narrator and shared, which is the same as Python. So we're now looking at the main one, and we've basically got the Lua equivalent of import lib keyboard as. We've got kb equals require lib.kboard and console equals require lib.console. So that's the kind of equivalent of importing a library. We're also importing the narrator, shared and game files, which are here. So that's a slight difference there. We don't need this in Python because Python has its own split, trim things. These are things that I've had to add for myself just to create the function that will split a string, for example. So we'll come back to these as and when we need to use them. Now the play function is very similar. So all we're doing here is to put shared game state equals shared game states quit. So those are pretty much identical. The only slight difference is that by convention in Python you tend to use lower case all the way through for your variables, and in C# and Lua you tend to use camel case. So we've got like a capital S and a capital G. It's not a strict rule, it's just a convention, so I've tried to follow that through. You'll see up here, like we've got shared dot trim, you've got the capital letter there, so that's just following the convention, but these two are pretty much identical. We are not at the moment using a take action. I don't know if I used it in Lua or not. Anyway, it's a function that we're not currently using, but the main one here in Python, we've got the Lua equivalent. So let's have a look. I put this in on the end of the last video I was doing just to play about with it to try and make it work. I'll just briefly demonstrate that. If I hit the go button, you can see that it has now resized the console to 80 characters by 25. It's a very large font, which is why it takes up most of this full HD screen, but it has resized it. So I can do something similar on this, but the reason I haven't bothered is that for this to run in a console, you have to run it from a command prompt or by double-clicking the file, having set everything up in Windows to actually run the Lua interpreter. So we're not going to gain anything by doing that here, so I haven't bothered to put that in. One of the major differences is that you'll see where we've got here, we cleared the console in Python to give us a row number of 0. We've got this word local. So local is used in Lua to change or keep control of the scope of the variable. So that's being declared as local inside this function main will actually keep it absolutely local to that function, and once that function's finished, the variable goes out of scope and is lost. So it's much clearer than Python, where something declared up here theoretically should be available to read, write, and isn't. You've heard me go on about this before. This is a far better system. Make it local by putting the word local. If you don't put the word local, then that variable is visible inside, outside, and including any other files that are part of the same project. It really is a global variable, so you don't get that with Python. So anyway, let's not worry too much about that. So we've got the word local there. Again, we've got if the game load game, so that's pretty much the same. Then we've got the shared game states here, same as before, and again a while loop. While the shared game state, I've actually in this one I've put less than game states quit, whereas here I've put equals game states play. Same job. Game state quit is, I believe, number 4, something like that, value of 4. So I could have just as easily have done here while the shared game state is less than quit. It was just a slightly alternate way of doing it, but it's nothing to do with the language. It's just an alternate way of doing it. Again, you've got the console clear, and then you've got the printing out of the messages. Now, this is slightly different. In Python, has very, very good ways of handling loops and handling lists. So in Python, it's for message in messages. Great. And print out the message. Great. Lua has this iPairs thing, so that the narrator end message, I don't know if I can get it to pop up there. No, it's not actually telling me what they are because I'm not running it, but the end message is one of a list, and you can go through the list by using this. The underscore kind of means don't take any notice of that. It's the key value of the pairs. So because we're dealing with a table, it acts more like a dictionary than it does a list. So you can't use a straightforward numeric index on it. You use this iPairs and you print the message out. So that's one major difference between Lua and Python, is the way you can iterate through lists. You generally use the iPairs or pairs. The difference between pairs and iPairs is that iPairs uses on a strict numerical list where they are just the same as a Python list where you've got numerical indexes. You use iPairs. If they are like dictionary pairs, then you use pairs, but they are interchangeable. You can kind of use them, but it starts to get complicated, so I won't bother to go into that too much. So let's go into the first one that we were doing with this one, is that we're going to load the game. So let's check how the game load game works in Lua. Just increase the font a bit. Right, so in the game load game, let's put it up on here. All it did here was to display the intro, and we've got something similar here. I'm actually clearing the console first, which I didn't bother on here, but that's probably unnecessary to do that anyway. And then display intro, very, very similar, just again the slight different way of spelling the function name. So display intro is up here, which is the Python equivalent here. So the intro text, which is what we're displaying, is a list again, as it was in Python. And again, we've got this kind of inbuilt function. If you remember in the Python, we had this like a sub function here. You can do exactly the same in Lua. So we've got, this is the function on the outside, and then we've got this internal one, which is called format line. And so it does exactly the same job as the equivalent Python one. it just fills a line with some UTF-8 characters with some filler, text filler. If you refer back to the video on Python, you'll see exactly what that does. So we've got this very, very similar function here. In fact, even the sort of calculations are very similar as you have here. Remember, with Lua you have if, then, end, whereas in Python you just have if, colon, and then it relies on white space, which, as you will know from my irritates me no end, because with this I could, if I wanted to, bring that line up to here and that line up to here, make it all one line, it would still run beautifully, which of course you can't do in Python. So that's the similar sort of thing here. This uses Lua's string repeat to fill up the gap here. If I just move that across, so we're using string.repeat, and then we're going to repeat with a space, and then the length of that we wanted to create. Whereas in Python we did it using this left justification, which again just created some spaces. Then we clear the console as before. In clear here, we've got again a local variable for the size, and then as we did in the Python, we're going through the list of strings to find which one is the longest, same as we did here, and then the longest one wins. And then we've got just to check whether that is an odd or an even number and correct it if it is. Then we're adding 12 to it. One slight downside of Lua is that in Python you can use the plus equals to add 12 to size equals size plus 12. You have to do it the longhand way in Lua. There is no plus equals, so size equals size plus 12, so that's a slight difference. The making up of the strings, we're just using string repeat instead of left justification. And then again, when we're printing them out, we're using this this key value in iPairs instead of just for string in intro that we're using in Python there. And then we're printing it all out. Now, Lua doesn't have a timer, like a time.sleep as you get in Python. You have to kind of cobble your own together, which I've done in the shared folder here. Let me just show you that. And there's quite a lot of functions in here that you don't need in Python because they already exist. So there it is. Let me just increase the font. So with shared stop.sleep, you pass in the number of seconds you want, and then it uses the operating system clock with a little kind of a bit here to modify it so that it gives you roughly the correct time. And this does seem to run quite well. This does actually run for 3 seconds. It's nowhere near as good as the time function in Python, but for these purposes it's good enough. So let's come back to where we were, and then we're clearing the console again, so that's pretty much the same as it was before. And we'll come back to where are we? Main. Yep, so we're checking the load game, and then we're going to here. I can run this one. Let me just I don't know whether to do it inside the... Yeah, we'll give it a try. I don't know how successful this is going to be. I'll see if I can run it in debug mode. So what we'll do is just to get that out of the way and expand this a bit, and then run that lift that up a bit there. That's better. So what I've done is I've put a stop sign here on line 49. I'll press the play button, and it's ready there. So we'll step through into that one. Just trying to remember what the step into is. It's this is where I was getting confused with the wing. It's F10 for stepping through in Zero Brain. So F10. So we're starting in the main function, and we're going to clear the console and return the row number. So let's step through into to that. So we should have -1. Because we're not in a console, it's returning -1. So let's move into the game load game, F10 again. Right, so we're loading the game, and as with the Python version, we're just displaying we're clearing the console again and then displaying the intro. So that will go into the beginning of this function, which is formatting the line. So the first line of text is oh, sorry, it's just reading just go down there. So we've cleared the console. So we're now going through this this loop here. So intro text, as you can see when I hover my mouse over, we've got three values there, as we had before. So these are the three strings that are held in this table called intro text, and we're going to go through them one by one. So if I press F10, we're going to check the first one. So we're only, at the moment, we're just getting the size, which has been currently set to 0. So F10, and that should have re-changed the size now to 34, and then press it again. Go through the whole loop. There we are. So size will now have been set to the longest one, which is 34 characters. We're checking whether it's an even number or not, as we saw it was. Now we're adding 12 to it, so it's currently 34, and we're adding 12, 46. And then, as with the Python equivalent, we're drawing out basically these boxes of text. I won't bother to step through all of those. We'll head down to here by pressing as you can see, it's actually appearing down here in the, because this is an IDE, it's not a console, it doesn't look quite so neat, and it's at the bottom, so it haven't got it as it was before at the top, but never mind. So we'll sleep for 3 seconds, clear the console. So I'll put it there, go to that point, that's it. So 3 seconds has passed. And that, of course, is returning true as it did before. So we've checked that the load game is okay, which was returned true, so obviously that's working. We're now setting the shared game state is currently 1, so we're going to set it to, because Lua is one based rather than 0 based index, I've used 1 to 5 rather than 0. So you'll see that the game states that it shows, and I hover the mouse over it, is that we've got dead equals 5, leaderboard 3, menu 1, play 2, and quit 4. So you can see that the tables are not in the order in which they were created. So you have to be aware of that. Is that you can't expect it to come out in the way that they were when this table was made in the shared library. I think I put it at the top here. There we go, look, menu 1, play 2, leaderboard 3, quit 4, dead 5. So that's the order they were put in, but they don't stay in that order in the table, so you need to always be aware of that when you are going through them. So let's go back to main. So we're checking again in this loop whether the play state is quit or not, and it does exactly the same as it did in the Python version. So I've pointed out the main differences there. The only other slight difference here is that when we've finished, the console here, if we were running in a console, there isn't an input, so you have to write out enter to quit and then IO read to wait for the user to press the enter key. I'll just see if I can find this file on the system so we can actually run it from Windows. Right, so here it is in the Windows Explorer. So we've got the files down here. So if I double click main.lua, again it starts up the console and quit straight away because it doesn't do anything else. So that's exactly the same as the Python one. One thing that I could do is again just to try and change the size and shape of this console. So let's go back to main, and what we can do is, before we clear the console, is see if we can reset it. So we'll go console.resize, and then we'll pass it 80, 25, and that should resize it. I'll just save that, and then we'll run that again from the Windows here, and hopefully it will resize the console this time. Yes, there we go. You saw it start quite big and then drop down, so that did the resize. Okay, so that's basically all this one does, but you can see it runs identically in both Python and Lua. So next one we'll do is the C# version, and then we'll from then start to build on the code that we've already put in to make our adventure game actually start to do something.